Now in Iraq, radical Islamist militants linked to al-Qaeda are reportedly planning to take Baghdad after successfully advancing in the north. The so-called Islamic State in Iraq and Syria group has already captured the entire province of Nineveh, which you can see here, including its regional capital. The extremists then moved south and captured the cities of Baiji and Tikrit, and their advance was halted just 100 kilometres from Baghdad. It's thought the government's now asked the US to carry out drone strikes against the insurgents. But Marina Portnaya explains now how that might mean Washington engaging against its own military hardware.
But we're leaving behind a sovereign, stable and self-reliant Iraq.
2.5 years later, the people America left behind are running away, fleeing for their lives.
Around 500,000 people have already escaped from Iraq's second city, Mosul, after the ISIL forced the army to retreat.
Reports say gunmen have also seized a nearby oil refinery town.
Iraq's Prime Minister calling for a state of emergency after hundreds of gunmen took control of strategic parts of the northern city of Mosul.
By Wednesday, militants had seized the Turkish consulate in Mosul, kidnapping the head of diplomatic mission and 24 staff members. Some 30,000 Iraqi soldiers reportedly turned and ran as militants from the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, known as ISIS, moved in, unleashing an all-out assault on the city.
They've taken control of hospitals, police stations. They have taken control of ammunition dumps and weapons stores that the fleeing government forces have left behind.
Many of the abandoned weapons and military hardware now in the hands of hardline terrorists were imported into Iraq from, guess where?
I think you all are aware of the shipments that we've provided that include the delivery of 300 Hellfire missiles, millions of rounds of small arms fire, thousands of rounds of tank ammunition, helicopter-fired rockets to the Iraqi security forces.
And don't forget about the U.S.-supplied Humvees. Here you can see ISIS insurgents riding and inspecting the vehicles, driving them across the border into war-torn Syria. Critics call it an unintended consequence of the U.S. war in Iraq coming home to roost.
There weren't any real sizable organized militant groups in Iraq until al-Qaeda of the Mesopotamia arose to fight back at the U.S. invasion. To help the army, we've trained them for 8 years, and that didn't seem to work. Bush dismantled the original Iraqi army after the U.S. invasion, and that's the root of the problem.
The U.S. war in Iraq cost Washington close to $1 trillion and the lives of more than 4,500 soldiers. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have reportedly been killed while the U.S. was looking for WMDs and spreading democracy. The unified and competent Iraqi military that was allegedly established has buckled. Weapons that were made in the USA are now in the hands of America's enemies, and the country left to fend for itself in a state of crisis. Marina Portnaya, RT.
Well, at least 2 million people have been displaced by the violence, and there are also reports of mass beheadings being carried out by the extremists. Investigative journalist Robert Parry, who is a Middle East specialist, believes Iraq is collapsing and the US should take responsibility.
Well, it suggests that the Iraqi military is in decay, that it's beginning to collapse. Clearly, this is a very divided country. In terms of the question of stability or instability, the U.S. invasion in 2003 was the force that shattered this nation. And it's been hard to imagine how it was going to be put back together in any meaningful way since then. You had even someone like then Senator Joe Biden, now the vice president, suggesting some years ago that the country should be divided in three, that you should have a Sunni section, a Shiite section, and a Kurdish section. And it seems to be moving in that direction.